Your seat is over there, third bench from the judge, the guard told her and led her into the courtroom. Vera walked in quietly and sat on the edge of the bench. She gripped the strap of her old bag and tried hard not to cry, staring at one spot in front of her. Her life, once bright and colorful like an artist's palette, now felt dull and gray, like a rough charcoal sketch on cardboard. Across from her sat Andrei, still legally her husband. Next to him, leaning on his shoulder, was Diana, his new lover. Her perfectly styled blonde hair shone under the lights. A triumphant smile played on her lips. From time to time, she shot Vera a quick, mocking look, then whispered something into Andrei's ear, and they both laughed quietly. Their laughter was sharp, like broken glass, scraping across Vera's nerves. "Stay home and cook cabbage soup, you cow with a tassel," Andrei sneered at her just minutes before the hearing began. "So, Vera, ready for your new life? Independent and broke." Diana giggled, hiding her mouth with a perfectly manicured hand. "Oh, don't be so harsh," she added mockingly. "She has everything she needs, her art, for example. She can paint herself a house, a car, or at least a dinner." Vera stayed silent. She knew that anything she said would be twisted, mocked, and thrown back at her. She was an artist. Her tools were brushes and canvas, not bitter words or legal tricks. "I was also thinking," Andrei continued, enjoying his sense of power, "about child support. Vera, you do realize I officially make almost nothing? You're young, healthy. Why should I pay to support you? And as for our son, well, you're a terrible mother. Everyone can see that. Always lost in your paints and fantasies. A child needs attention, not some bohemian poverty." His words felt like sharp stones thrown straight at her. He had been repeating the same lines for the past 6 months, ever since his mistress appeared. He knew exactly where to hit her so it would hurt most. "And the house," he said slowly, savoring each word. "It's in my name. Doesn't matter that the money came from selling your late grandmother's apartment. The papers are all in order. So pack up your easels and paints. You'll have a couple of weeks." "Court is now in session," came a firm voice. Everyone stood. An older man with tired but sharp eyes entered the room. He looked around the hall without expression and began the hearing. Andrei's lawyer, in a dry tone, listed the reasons for divorce, his demands, and his conditions. Vera listened. With every word, her despair grew heavier. She had nothing, no evidence, no money, no tricks up her sleeve, only a broken heart and a small son waiting for her at home. "And so," the lawyer finished, "my client, Andrei Lagunov, sees no reason to pay child support in the requested amount, and he insists on keeping all property registered in his name." The judge looked at Vera. "Do you have anything to say?" The silence in the room felt deafening. She could feel Andrei's mocking stare and his mistress's smug smile. What could she say? That she had invested not money, but her soul into their home? That she had created comfort there while her husband built a new life on the side? That she had stayed awake through long nights when little Dima was sick, while Andrei was out with his lover? None of that mattered here. The judge needed facts, not feelings. At that moment, Vera made her choice. Slowly, almost like in a dream, she stood up. Her knees were shaking, but she took one step, then another, toward the judge's table. A surprised whisper spread across the courtroom. "What kind of circus is this?" Andrei hissed. Vera stopped at the barrier. In her hand was a small piece of paper, folded neatly into quarters, looking almost like a simple note. "Your Honor," her voice was quiet, but in the heavy silence it sounded like a cry. "I don't have legal arguments, but I do have this. Please look." She handed the paper to the judge. He took it, puzzled, and unfolded it. It was a child's drawing, bright, clumsy, drawn in colored pencils. On it stood 3 figures holding hands. A tall, smiling man with the word Dad. Next to him, a woman with long brown hair in a flowered dress, Mom. Between them, a small boy in a blue t-shirt, arms stretched wide to hug them both. Above his head, written in uneven letters, Me, Dima. In the corner was a date, written in a child's shaky handwriting. May 7th, 3 years ago. The judge stared at the drawing for a long time. His face, once expressionless, softened. He looked up at Andrei, who was visibly irritated, then at Vera, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The judge saw more than a child scribbles. He saw a world that had been broken, where once a father was a hero and a mother was happy. This drawing, the judge said softly, almost to himself, speaks louder than any document. He cleared his throat, regaining his formal tone. Given these, let me emphasize, emotional circumstances, the court finds it necessary to grant a pause. All parties should reconsider their positions, especially concerning the best interests of the minor child. The hearing will be postponed for 2 weeks. The gavel struck the wood with a dull thud. What? Andrei jumped up. Your Honor, on what basis? Over some piece of paper? This is manipulation. Diana quickly joined in, her face twisted with anger. She's just playing for pity. This is unfair. But Vera didn't hear them anymore. She turned around and, without looking at anyone, walked toward the exit. She hadn't won, of course not. But she hadn't lost either. You'll regret this. Andrei's angry voice echoed behind her. 2 weeks won't change anything. You'll still end up with nothing. Vera pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the hallway. The cool October air brushed against her burning cheeks. Outside, autumn was in full glory. Maple trees were dropping red leaves onto the wet pavement. The wind played with her hair, and the air smelled of damp leaves and rain. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out, expecting another angry message from her husband. Instead, a familiar name lit up the screen. Yevgeny Valentinovich Nelyabov. Have you forgotten our arrangement? The text read. Vera smiled a little, embarrassed. Of course, she had forgotten. The court nightmare had pushed everything else out of her mind. He had found her through a gallery owner who sometimes sold her paintings. The young businessman needed an artist to finish a painting for his wife, who was struggling with health problems. Vera quickly typed a reply. Of course, I remember. I'm already on my way. She sent the message, put the phone away, and hurried toward the bus stop. The bus had just arrived. Vera was about to step inside when the elderly woman in front of her stumbled on the high step. Her string bag slipped from her hands, and bright red apples and a couple of potatoes rolled across the pavement. Oh dear, the old lady sighed, trying to keep her balance. The bus doors started closing. From inside came irritated voices. Come on. Are we going or not? Vera froze for a moment. If she missed this bus, she would be late. Nelyabov would definitely be annoyed. But she couldn't just leave the woman like that. She waved off the leaving bus and knelt to help. Don't worry, we'll gather everything. Did you hurt yourself? Oh, thank you, dear, the woman said with relief. Her eyes were kind but faded. Twisted my ankle. I'm too old now, no strength left. Vera smiled softly and picked up the scattered groceries, ignoring the annoyed sighs of the others waiting. When the last apple was back in the bag, she helped the woman step aside. Thank you, my dear, the woman said again, brushing off her coat. But look, your bus is gone. It's okay, Vera sighed, looking at the empty street. I'll wait for the next one. The woman gave her a strange smile, as if she knew something Vera didn't. Your bus will come, don't worry. But right now, you don't need to go where you think you're going. Vera looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? The old woman winked playfully. Fate works like that sometimes. It may delay you for 5 minutes, only to change the whole course of your life. Sorry, I don't quite understand, Vera admitted. My name is Tamara, the woman said kindly. And you don't have to understand. Just know this, you did the right thing by stopping, by missing that bus, and not going to your client today. It's not time yet. Vera froze in surprise. And where are you from? I see bits and pieces of the future sometimes, Tamara said calmly. Not a full picture, just fragments. Some call it fortune-telling, but I don't really like that word. She shrugged as if talking about the weather. Vera looked at her, confused. Maybe I should walk you home, Vera offered, deciding the old woman probably just needed help. Do you live far? No, just around the corner, Tamara smiled. Come on, since you missed your bus anyway. They walked together through the rustling autumn leaves toward an old 5-story building. Vera stayed quiet, trying to process everything that had happened that day. Tamara, on the other hand, spoke softly about how the most important meetings happen when you least expect them, and how a broken cup can never be glued back together no matter how hard you try. When they reached the entrance to her building, Tamara said goodbye. Vera was left standing alone in the quiet courtyard. It was about a 40-minute walk to the Nelyabov family's house. She checked the time, then looked at the road ahead. Strangely, Tamara's words had calmed her. Vera felt like she wasn't late at all. She was exactly where she needed to be. So she decided to walk through the golden autumn city, not knowing what awaited her. The closer she got to the address, the more the world around her changed. Plain apartment blocks gave way to neat cottages, then to grand mansions hidden among tall pine trees. The Nelyabov estate stood at the very end of a street. It looked like a fortress, built of dark brick and glass, surrounded by a tall wrought iron fence. Everything about it spoke not only of wealth but of aristocratic luxury, confident, imposing, a little overwhelming. As Vera approached, the gate opened silently. On the perfectly trimmed lawn, among glowing red maples and late-blooming roses, a man in a neat uniform was working. Noticing her, he put down his clippers and walked over. You must be Vera. My name is Artyom. I'm the gardener. Yevgeny Valentinovich is expecting you. He addressed her formally, with respect, something she hadn't felt in a long time from her own husband. It was unusual, pleasant. Artyom led her along a path of pale stone to a massive oak door. Please go in. Inside, the house was even more impressive. Cool marble floors, high ceilings stretching up to the second floor, and a crystal-clear silence broken only by the ticking of an old grandfather clock. From the living room came a man, young, around 35. He had a strong jawline, serious gray eyes, and that tired crease between his brows that only appears on people carrying a heavy burden. Vera Ivanovna, hello. Thank you for coming, Nelyabov greeted her. Hello, Yevgeny Valentinovich, Vera replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Please have a seat. He pointed to the sofa and turned to the maid who had just entered. Lenachka, bring some coffee, please. No, thank you. I'd rather start right away. Vera quickly declined, feeling uncomfortable. Nelyabov nodded, and there was a hint of approval in his eyes. All right, then I'll explain. As I mentioned on the phone, my wife Tatiana is an artist as well, or rather, she was. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Vera noticed how his jaw tightened. After the accident, Tanya can't move or speak anymore. But she still understands, she still feels. He took a breath. Before the tragedy, my wife had started painting a landscape, the view from her studio window. I want you to finish it for her. Maybe it will give her some kind of spark. I understand, Vera said softly, her heart filling with compassion. Come, I'll show you, he said, leading her up the wide staircase. They walked down a quiet hallway and stopped at the last door. When Yevgeny opened it, Vera was hit by a mix of scents, the sterile smell of medicine and the sweet perfume of lilies in a tall vase. The room was full of light. By a huge window overlooking the garden stood a medical bed. Lying in it, under a thin cashmere blanket, was a woman. Her blonde hair was neatly arranged, and her thin, aristocratic face looked like a porcelain doll. But her wide-open blue eyes stared at the ceiling, blank, unblinking. Vera's breath caught. She had expected to see a sick woman, yes, but not this, a motionless body, showing no sign of life except for steady breathing. Like a vegetable. God, how awful, flashed through her mind. Tanechka, Yevgeny's voice suddenly softened, full of tenderness. Vera is here. She's the artist. She'll help you finish your painting. There was no reaction, only silence and those empty eyes. Next to the bed, by the window, stood an easel. On it was a large canvas. Vera stepped closer. The painting showed their house, done in a soft impressionist style. full of talent. But only half of it was finished. The rest was just empty white canvas, no sky, no trees, no garden, no life. Tatiana painted only what was already built, Yevgeny explained. She wanted to add the garden and the sky after, but she never got the chance. Vera ran her fingers lightly along the edge of the canvas, studying the brushstrokes. She could feel the hand of a true artist in the painting, the soul poured into that unfinished part. "This is difficult work," Vera said softly, almost to herself. "I'll need to match your wife's brush style exactly." "You can do it." The businessman's voice carried a hope he couldn't hide. Vera glanced at motionless Tatiana, then at Yevgeny, whose eyes were heavy with grief. She nodded firmly. "Yes. I think it will take me about 3 days." "Perfect." Yevgeny let out a relieved sigh. "Don't worry, payment will be more than fair. Plus, a bonus for me personally. But there is one condition." "What kind of condition?" Vera asked cautiously. "You must work only here, in this room, with Tatiana present." Vera froze. To create in such a heavy atmosphere, in front of a paralyzed woman, it felt suffocating. "Why?" The words slipped out before she could stop herself. "I want Tanya to see everything," Yevgeny explained gently, tucking the blanket around his wife's shoulder. "She can't join in, but she can still feel the process." Art meant everything to her. At least let it remain in her life this way. His words struck Vera straight in the heart. Suddenly, the mocking face of Andrei, her betrayer, faded from her thoughts. Looking at Yevgeny now, she saw a man full of love and loyalty. In this cold, grand house that felt like a tomb, something real was still alive, his devotion to his broken wife. She felt respect and admiration replace her earlier shock. "I agree," Vera said firmly. "I understand. When do I start?" "Tomorrow, around 10 o'clock. Does that work?" "Yes, that's fine." Yevgeny smiled, opened a drawer, and pulled out a white envelope. "Here, take this. An advance. 1/3 of the agreed sum." Vera looked at the money, uncertain. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Well, I usually don't take advance payments," she admitted. Yevgeny shook his head with a half-smile, then casually slipped the envelope into her bag. Catching her surprised look, he explained, "I don't want us to start with any misunderstanding. Please don't refuse me." She smiled faintly and didn't argue. After all, clients were always right. By the time Yevgeny walked her to the door, Vera no longer felt crushed and lost, like she had just half an hour earlier. Maybe here, by finishing someone else's painting, she could also piece together her own shattered life. The heavy iron gates closed behind her with a dull, final click, shutting her out of that world of velvet lawns and silent luxury. Walking down the golden leaf path, she felt the stress of the long, crazy day finally begin to lift. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. Vera pulled her thin coat tighter and quickened her pace. Ahead, she saw the warm glow of a small grocery store, a bright little island in the gathering dusk. And suddenly, tenderness washed over her, dissolving the weariness and bitterness. Dimka, her little boy, already so grown up. She couldn't go home to him empty-handed. Not tonight. Would you like me to continue this story with the scene where Vera comes home to her son, or keep it focused on her emotional shift after leaving Yevgeny's house? The shop smelled of fresh bread and chocolate. Vera walked past the shelves with pasta and grains and went straight to the sweets section. Her eyes stopped on a cake with bright cream and a cherry on top. Dima's favorite. She picked 2. In another aisle on the toy shelf, she saw a small race car model, exactly like the one her son had shown her in a magazine not long ago. The price was high, but Vera firmly placed the box into her basket. This was more important than her own dinner. A gift for her son's soul, and for hers too. Their little rented house, hidden at the end of a quiet street, greeted her with a warm light in the window. Her heart beat faster. Dima was home, waiting. As soon as she put the key in the lock, the door flew open. Her son was there, hair messy, wearing his favorite dinosaur t-shirt, and looking so serious that Vera couldn't help but smile. "Mama, you're back," he shouted, throwing his arms around her neck in a tight hug. "I'm back," Vera whispered, burying her face in his shampoo-scented hair. "And what smells so good here? Did you cook something?" she asked. "I made dinner for you," Dima said proudly, letting her go and pulling her toward the small kitchen. "So, you can eat right after work because you're tired, right?" Vera's throat tightened. On the little table, covered with a clean tablecloth, stood 2 plates. Each had steaming hot sausages and a big scoop of mashed potatoes, sprinkled with fresh dill. Next to it was a bowl of salad with cucumbers and tomatoes cut into big chunks. It was a real feast. "Dima," was all she could manage to say as tears filled her eyes. She sat down, pulled her son into her arms, and hugged him tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks, falling on his small shoulders. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure love. In that simple dinner, in those unevenly cut tomatoes, there was more care than in all the gifts and promises she had ever received from Andrei in 10 years of marriage. Vera understood at that moment she could handle anything. For this little boy with such a big heart, she was ready to move mountains. "Mama, why are you crying? Is it not tasty?" Dima asked worriedly, peeking into her face. "No, sweetheart." Vera quickly wiped her tears. "It smells amazing. I'm crying because I'm so happy because you're growing up into such a wonderful young man. Thank you, my love." Then she pulled out the cakes and the toy car from her bag. Her son's eyes lit up with joy, though he tried to stay serious, like an adult. "This is for you," Vera smiled, "for making me the best dinner of my life." Finally, they sat down to eat. The mashed potatoes were a little too salty, the sausages slightly overcooked, but to Vera, it was the most delicious meal she had ever tasted. "Mom," Dima began carefully, pushing a cucumber around his plate with his fork. "How was court today?" Vera set her fork down. She knew this question would come sooner or later. "It's okay, sweetheart. The judge postponed the hearing. We still have 2 weeks. But your dad, he got really angry." She looked into her son's worried eyes. She couldn't lie to him, but she also didn't want to scare him with the truth. "Your dad was just in a bad mood," she said softly. "But you know what helped me more than anything today?" Dima shook his head. "Your drawing," Vera whispered like it was a secret. "The one you made 3 years ago. Remember? Us together at a picnic? I put it right on the judge's desk." "Really?" Dima's eyes went wide. "And what did he do?" "He looked at it," Vera said. "For a long, long time. I think that's why he gave us more time. He saw how wonderful you are, and maybe he even felt how happy we once were as a family. Your picture was stronger than all the angry words." Dima's face lit up. The idea that his little drawing could change something in the scary adult world filled him with pride. "Can I draw more?" he asked eagerly. "A lot of them. So the judge will make the right choice for sure." Vera laughed through her tears. "Of course you will, but later. Right now, let's try those pastries. I think we've earned a little celebration today." "Great." Dima grinned. Watching him eat dessert with cream smeared on his nose and cheeks, Vera felt something new inside. Real confidence. Let her ex keep his fancy house. Let his mistress gloat over her so-called victory. None of it mattered. Her greatest treasure, her real wealth, was sitting right across the table. And she wasn't giving up her son to anyone. After dinner, while Dima happily played with his new toy car, Vera washed the dishes. She could scrub away the food from the plates, but not the heaviness from her heart. Then she sat beside him to check his homework. Math, Russian. Everything was perfect. Her smart boy. Her pride. She kissed the top of his head and tucked him into bed. Alone in the quiet, listening to the ticking clock and her own racing heartbeat, she wondered what tomorrow would bring in the luxurious but cold Nelyubov house. Would she be able to work under the silent gaze of that paralyzed woman? The night passed in a restless half-sleep. Vera kept drifting in and out of short, restless sleep, waking up at every little noise. By morning, she felt completely worn out. A strong cup of coffee helped her a little. She got sleepy Dima ready for school, fixed a scarf, and waved goodbye, watching him until he disappeared around the corner. Grabbing the heavy bag she had packed the night before, full of paints, brushes, and thinner, Vera stepped outside. The weather had turned ugly overnight. A cold autumn rain fell in a fine, miserable drizzle. She suddenly remembered she had forgotten her umbrella back in their old house, the one that wasn't hers anymore. She'd left it behind in a rush, while Andrei had thrown in some sarcastic comment. Pulling her thin coat tighter around her, she hurried on, but it was quickly soaking through. Raindrops ran down her hair and face until finally she reached the familiar iron gates. Just as she was about to open the small gate, a black SUV flew past, splashing her from head to toe with a wave of dirty water. Vera froze, shocked. Ugly brown stains bloomed across her beige coat. Her eyes filled with tears, of hurt, of exhaustion, of humiliation. It was the last straw. She almost turned back. Maybe she should just give up, go home. Vera Ivanovna, a familiar voice called. She turned reluctantly. From his little shed near the garage, the gardener came running out. Seeing her soaked state, Artyom frowned. What a jerk. Come on, quickly, you'll catch a cold, he said, guiding her into his small shelter. Inside, it smelled of earth, dried herbs, and something warm and comforting. Artyom switched on an old oil heater and pointed to a chair. Take off your coat, I'll hang it up to dry. I'll make you some hot tea, he offered. He moved a bit stiffly, almost shy, as he set an old kettle on the stove and took out 2 cups. Vera sat, hugging herself, watching his broad back. There was something unusual about him. He didn't seem like just a simple gardener. She sensed a kind of quiet strength in him. Thank you, she whispered when he handed her a steaming cup. You really saved me. It's nothing, he said, sitting on a stool to the side, careful not to intrude on her space. The roads are like obstacle courses these days. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds were the hiss of the heater and the steady tapping of rain on the roof. Have you worked here long? Vera asked, just to break the awkward silence. This garden looks perfect. You must have real talent to keep it this way. Artyom gave a bitter smile. Honestly, I'm not much of a gardener. The man before me, Fedor Innokentyevich, he was the real master. I only came here not that long ago. I'm self-taught, no formal training. And before this job, if it's not a secret, Artyom lifted his eyes. His gaze was deep, sad, almost as if he wasn't looking at Vera at all, but through her, into his own past. His face darkened, and he set his cup aside. No secrets. I'll tell you straight. I used to be a doctor. A neurosurgeon. Vera froze. A neurosurgeon, now a gardener? I don't understand. Is this some kind of joke? What's there to understand? He said, staring at the wall. There was a complicated surgery. I was assisting a colleague. He made a fatal mistake. The patient almost ended up disabled. He begged me to take the blame, said he'd be fired, and he had a big family and loans. I was young, overconfident. I thought my reputation could carry me through. I had no idea who that patient really was. Artyom paused, swallowing hard. He turned out to be a very powerful man. Right there in the hospital corridor, he swore he'd destroy me. And he kept his word. Suddenly there were complaints, inspections, anonymous reports. Then one day, traffic police stopped me on the highway after a tip. They opened my trunk, and inside were boxes of rare, expensive medicines. I had never even seen them before. But my fingerprints were on the boxes. I had signed for a delivery at the clinic the day before. I was framed perfectly. They gave me 7 years. I served 4, then got out early. My diploma is just paper now. My hands remember everything, but who needs a doctor with a criminal record? He fell silent, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Vera's heart ached for him. What a cruel injustice. A ruined life. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Artyom only waved his hand, brushing it off. Just then, the door burst open. Yevgeny stood in the doorway, his face cold and displeased. His eyes slid over Vera, then fixed on Artyom with a hard glare. What's going on here? Vera Ivanovna, your work started 10 minutes ago. And you, he turned to Artem, his voice sharp as steel. Why aren't you in the garden? I only offered her tea. She was soaked from the rain. Artem said quickly, rising to his feet. Her problems are none of your concern. Your job is to cut the grass, not host tea parties. Vera Ivanovna, I expect you in the house immediately. He spun on his heel and left without waiting for an answer. The little room seemed to freeze with tension. Go, Artem said quietly, not lifting his eyes. He doesn't like it when things aren't done his way. Vera threw on her still damp coat, grabbed her bag, and with one last sympathetic look at the man, stepped back out into the rain. She followed behind Nelyabov's long stride toward the house, where work, a silent mistress, and a strange commission were waiting. Tatiana's room looked just as it had yesterday. The woman lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. But when Vera stepped toward the easel, Tatiana's eyes slowly shifted and fixed on her. Vera felt a wave of discomfort, as if she was intruding into something deeply private. Tatiana's been through a lot, Yevgeny suddenly said, standing by his wife's bed. He gently adjusted her blanket. Not long before the accident, she had a miscarriage. She lost the baby. Vera froze. The news painted an even darker shadow over the already tragic picture. I'll leave you now, Nelyabov said. Soon the nurse will arrive. Irina will take care of all the medical procedures. Don't mind her. Just work as you need. The door closed softly behind him. The air seemed heavy, filled with silence and someone else's pain. Vera took a deep breath, squeezed some paint onto the palette, and picked up her brush. The first stroke was shaky, clumsy. Her hands trembled. She felt Tatiana's gaze pressing on her. It wasn't empty. It carried a silent question, a plea, and despair. It was as if Tatiana was screaming inside, but the voice couldn't escape. Unable to hold back, Vera set down the brush and stepped closer to the bed. Can you hear me? She asked softly. No response. Only that heavy, unblinking gaze. I don't even know why I'm doing this, Vera whispered. Feels like it's more for me than for your husband. She hesitated, then added, but if you do understand me, could you blink, please? A few seconds passed. Then Tatiana's eyelids lowered once, slowly, deliberately. Vera's heart raced. My God, she breathed. Okay then. If yes, blink twice. If no, blink once. Is that all right? Two slow, clear blinks. Vera caught her breath. She was standing at the edge of something frightening, or something very important. All right, she whispered, trying to steady her trembling hands. So, the painting, the work itself, you don't mind that. But the fact that I'm the one finishing it? One blink. No. Vera faltered. But her husband had insisted. Okay, let's try this another way. She stepped back to the easel. I'll point to different parts of the painting, and you give me a sign. Deal? 2 blinks. Yes. She pointed at the unfinished roof of the house. 1 blink. No. She pointed at the sky. Should it be stormy? 1 blink. No. Then Vera's finger slid down to the massive old oak that Tatiana had already painted in detail. It filled a large part of the canvas. The tree, something's wrong with it? 2 quick, desperate blinks. Yes, Vera whispered. She leaned in, staring at the dark, heavy paint that formed the bark of the oak. But at first glance, there was nothing unusual. What did she mean? Tatiana's pleading eyes didn't leave her. There had to be something hidden under the paint. Vera's hands went straight to her bag. She pulled out a small bottle of solvent and a cotton pad. Forgive me if I'm wrong, she whispered, as her fingers touched the canvas. Carefully, millimeter by millimeter, Vera began wiping away the top layer of paint. The dark brown pigment resisted, but she didn't stop. As an artist, she knew no rushing. And then, just under the paint, a faint line appeared, scratched by something sharp. Another careful wipe, and Vera saw it. A tiny cross, almost invisible, hidden beneath the fresh paint. She gasped. So that was it. Tatiana wanted someone to find it. It was a sign. At that very moment, the lock clicked, and a woman in a white coat stepped in. Good morning, the nurse said cheerfully. We need to do some procedures. Please, leave the room for about 20 minutes. Vera quickly pulled her hand away from the canvas, stealing one last glance at Tatiana. In the woman's eyes flickered something like gratitude. In the hallway, leaning against a cold wall, Vera realized this was much bigger and far more dangerous than just an artist's job. This house was keeping a secret, and it seemed she was the only one trusted with it. She stood still, hearing muffled sounds from behind the door. The nurse's cough, the creak of equipment. But her mind kept circling back to the cross on the oak. That couldn't just be coincidence. Tatiana, trapped in her own body, was trying to tell her something. And she had painted and hidden that cross right before the terrible accident. Vera walked to the large window at the end of the hall. The morning rain had finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, and the droplets on the glass sparkled like diamonds. And there in the garden stood the oak. Wet, massive, majestic. Its branches, washed clean by the rain, shone in the sun. Vera felt a strange, restless excitement. While everyone's attention was fixed on Tatiana's room, she slipped quietly down the stairs and out the side door into the yard. The smell of wet leaves and ozone hit her immediately. The grass soaked her shoes within seconds, but she didn't care. She walked quickly toward the oak. Its bark was old, deeply grooved, and at her height there was a hollow, dark and gaping. Holding her breath, Vera reached inside. It was cold, damp, smelling of rot. What could be in there? But to her disappointment, her fingers only brushed against wet dust and a few dry leaves. Nothing else. Defeated, Vera pressed her forehead against the rough trunk. What a fool I am, Vera thought. I went and made up a detective story in my head, and now I'm stuck in it. That little cross was probably nothing, just a sketch Tatiana painted over. And here I am, acting like some kind of spy. She was about to leave when her eyes caught a flash of metal under a lilac bush. A garden trowel, probably left behind by Artyom. A wild thought sparked in her mind. What if? Vera grabbed the cold handle. The soil near the oak's roots was soft after the rain, easy to dig into. She glanced nervously at the windows of the house as she worked, feeling like both a criminal and a rescuer at the same time. Then the blade scraped against something solid, metal. She tossed the trowel aside and clawed at the dirt with her bare hands, ignoring the mud under her nails. At last, she pulled out a small, sealed metal box, like an old army first aid kit. Her hands trembled so much, she could barely unfasten the tight clasp. Inside, carefully wrapped in layers of plastic, was a thick, leather-bound journal. Just then, voices rang out nearby. Artyom, I told you to put the tools away. What's wrong with you? I expect everything to be in order, but with you it's always a mess, barked Yevgeny's irritated voice, coming from around the corner. Vera's heart dropped. No time. She shoved the journal under her sweater. It pressed coldly against her skin, then quickly covered the hole with dirt and leaves, stomping it down before ducking behind the oak trunk, pressed into its shadow. Nelyabov walked past, still scolding the gardener. Luckily, he didn't even glance her way. The moment they disappeared around the house, Vera slipped out of her hiding place, forcing herself to breathe evenly, and hurried back inside. She made it just in time. The nurse was leaving Tatiana's room. You can continue, Irina said flatly without looking at her. Vera stepped inside. The hard journal under her sweater pressed against her ribs, reminding her of the dangerous treasure she'd found. She picked up her brush at the easel. Her eyes met Tatiana's. This time, they weren't only pleading, there was something more. Gratitude.
And fear.
Vera gave the faintest nod to show she had it. Then she dipped the brush into paint and touched the canvas with steady hands. Time slipped away. Evening shadows deepened over the garden, turning the golden leaves into shades of crimson and violet. Vera carefully washed the brushes and put the paints back into her bag. Behind her, in the deep armchair, Tatiana lay motionless. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, as if burning a hole through it into another, unreachable world. The door creaked softly. Yevgeny stood in the doorway. He had changed out of his business suit into a cashmere sweater, the color of wet asphalt. It made him look almost cozy, almost homely. "Are you finishing up?" he asked. "Yes, Yevgeny Valentinovich. I think that's all for today," Vera replied, zipping up her bag. "I've made the main sketches of the second half of the house and outlined the shadows from the veranda. Tomorrow I'll start adding details." "Excellent." The businessman walked closer to the easel and tilted his head. For a moment, his shadow covered both Vera and the unfinished canvas. "Wonderful. You have such a light hand. You've captured her style so well. I'm sure Tanya will appreciate it." He said this while looking at his motionless wife. Vera followed his gaze and answered carefully, "Thank you. I do my best." "I had no doubt about your professionalism," Yevgeny smiled. "Well then, until tomorrow. I'll be here at 10. "Yes, I'll be waiting," Vera nodded as he walked her to the door. "And thank you again. You're giving my wife the chance to see her creation continue to live." Outside, the cool evening air stung her face. Walking down the quiet, tree-lined street, Vera could feel her heart pounding wildly. She couldn't wait any longer. Turning into a small park with empty benches, she sat under the dim glow of a street lamp. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the thick notebook from her bag. With excitement and fear, Vera tore off the plastic wrap. The cover was soft, dark red leather with gold embossing, Tatiana Skorobogatova. Vera opened the first page. The handwriting was neat, slightly slanted, every letter written with care. She began to read, flipping quickly through pages of girlish dreams and notes about first dates. She needed to find what mattered now. And then she found it. June 15th, 5 years ago. Papa praised Genya again today. He said he can finally feel at peace about me and the company. He's got real business sense, daughter. Papa told me as he hugged me on the veranda. He's not a dreamer like you and me. He'll build an empire and you'll be its queen. I laughed and said I didn't need an empire. I only need him, my Genya. That evening, we walked in the garden together. Ahead of us is only happiness. I know it, I feel it. October 3rd, 5 years ago. Papa's heart stopped today. It happened so quickly, I still can't believe it. It feels like the world has collapsed. The only one keeping me afloat is Genya. He's taking care of the funeral, the documents, everything. He's so strong. The notary said that everything my father owned, his fortune, the company's shares, was now mine. But I didn't understand any of it. I told Genya to take care of everything himself. He looked at me strangely and said, "Of course, my love, don't worry about anything." But in his eyes, I thought I saw something different, almost foreign. Maybe it's just the grief, I told myself. We're both at our limit. Vera gasped for air, a shiver running through her bones. She turned a few dozen more pages. The handwriting grew sharper, more hurried. January 12th, 4 years ago. Today Genya and I had our first real fight. Over something silly. I said I wanted to invite my university friends to visit, and he suddenly exploded. He shouted that they only wanted money from me, that ever since my father's death, vultures were circling around me. I tried to argue, said they were my friends. "Your friends?" he snapped, grabbing my hand so hard I screamed. His fingers felt like steel clamps. "Now you only have one friend, me. Do you understand?" he said. I looked into his eyes and didn't recognize him. That wasn't my Genya. That was someone else. Someone cruel. I pulled my hand free. A dark red mark was left on my wrist. When he saw it, his face changed instantly. He dropped to his knees, kissed my hands, begged for forgiveness. I believed him. I forgave him. But the bruise remained. Vera's head spun. She raised her eyes, trying to focus on the street lamp above. It was all too familiar. Andrei used to tell her the same thing after every outburst. "You pushed me to it, Vera. It's your fault." She forced herself to keep reading. The entries grew darker, more frightening. May 7th, 3 years ago. I'm 10 weeks pregnant. I'm overjoyed. I think the baby will change everything. Bring back our love. Bring me back my Genya. I wanted to surprise him with the news tonight. But he came home furious. Something went wrong at the stock exchange. A bad deal. He yelled that I was useless, living comfortably at home while he worked himself to death to keep my father's empire alive. I tried to calm him down, went to him by the stairs, but I don't remember the push. I remember only how the ground slipped from under my feet. A sharp, stabbing pain in my lower belly, and his voice above me, scared, but fake scared. Tanya, you're so clumsy. You should watch your step. At the hospital, the doctor said it was just an accident, that this happens sometimes, a miscarriage. Genya sat beside me, holding my hand, crying. But I looked at him and knew it was his fault. Tears streamed down Vera's cheeks, falling onto the diary pages. She covered her mouth with her hand, so she wouldn't scream. The last entries were written in shaky, almost unrecognizable handwriting. September 18th, a year ago. Genya fired Maria Stepanovna, the housekeeper who had worked since my father's time. Then the driver, Uncle Vitya. Now the gardener, Anton Innokentivich. Everyone who had been loyal to my father, everyone who might notice something, gone. The new gardener, Artyom, seems fine. But the nurse, she's clearly Genya's person. I feel trapped. He controls my whole life now, my accounts, my contacts, everything. He's waiting for something. I feel it. Genya wants to get rid of me. Maybe it will look like another accident. I have to do something. I started painting this picture. Our old oak in the garden. Papa loved to sit under it. I painted a little cross hidden under the layers of paint. That's the sign. Under that oak, in the old hiding place Papa and I made when I was a child, I'm leaving this diary. This is my only will, my cry for help. If you, whoever you are reading this, then my husband got what he wanted. It means I can't speak anymore. But I wasn't crazy. Please save me. Vera snapped the diary shut. Her hands were stiff with cold. The autumn park around her was silent, but in her ears still rang Tanya's voiceless scream. She stood up from the bench. The bag of paints pulled on her shoulder, but she thought, no. Tomorrow would be different. She gripped the diary tighter. It wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon. And she knew she had to use it for Tanya, yes, for everyone. Cold drops of rain sank not just into her coat, but into her very soul. That night, Vera didn't sleep. She clutched Tanya's diary to her chest like a relic. Fear whispered to her that this was a dangerous game, that the price might be not just her own life, but her son's too. But then she remembered the empty, frozen gaze of that paralyzed woman. And in that moment, determination won over fear. Morning greeted her with a heavy gray sky and the same drizzling rain. At the police station, the duty officer glanced at her and wordlessly pointed toward an office. Major Sokolov, a man in his 40s, listened silently, tapping his pen on the desk now and then. His face showed nothing but professional skepticism. So, Vera Ivanovna, he said when she finished her nervous story. You're claiming that a certain businessman may be behind his wife's accident and now keeps her like a prisoner. And your only proof is this diary? It's not just a diary. Vera leaned forward, her voice trembling with emotion. It's a cry for help. Please, read it yourself. Sokolov sighed and reluctantly opened the notebook. His eyes scanned a few pages, then a few more. The bored look on his face slowly disappeared, replaced by sharp focus. When he looked up at Vera again, his eyes were different, keen, piercing. He said I would become like a vegetable, just watching in silence while he spent all my money. Major Sokolov read aloud from the diary, then snapped it shut. All right, we'll check this. Stay available. 2 police cars quietly rolled up to the iron gates. Vera sat inside one of them, gripping the seatbelt so tightly her knuckles turned white. They were met by Artyom. He looked calm, but there was worry in his eyes. Where is Yevgeny Nelyabov? Sokolov asked sharply. Artyom glanced at the major, then at Vera. She read silent approval in his look. He left about an hour ago, Artyom replied. In a hurry?
Yes.
Not alone. He was with the nurse, the one caring for Tatiana. Lately, Irina had been far too close to the master of the house. Sokolov muttered through his teeth. So, he suspected something. Did he know we were coming? I don't know. Artyom shrugged. But before leaving, he checked the security cameras. He has remote access on his phone. Right after that, he grabbed a bag and told Irina to get in the car fast.
All right.
Put out an alert, Sokolov barked. Black SUV, license plate. He turned to Artyom, who quickly gave the number of the owner's car. The police entered the house. Vera and Artyom followed. Tatyana's room was silent. She was still lying in bed, eyes half open, but something had changed. The dead emptiness in her gaze was gone. When Sokolov approached her, her lips moved. "Medicine," she whispered so faintly everyone froze. Her voice was raspy, like an old rusty machine finally coming to life. "He drugged me, kept me quiet," Vera gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. "Tatyana Petrovna, can you tell us where he went?" "Where is Yevgeny?" the investigator asked gently. There was a long pause. Tatyana swallowed with effort. "The dacha," she breathed. "He always hides there when there's trouble." That was enough. Sokolov gave new orders immediately. The arrest happened quickly. Nelyabov and his mistress were caught at the secret dacha, 20 kilometers from the city. They hadn't even unpacked their bags. At the very first interrogation, faced with diary excerpts and his wife's testimony, Yevgeny broke down. Trying to make a deal, he started talking. Later, the phone call from the major reached Vera while she was standing in Tatyana's room. She had stopped before one of Albert's paintings, not daring to touch it. "Vera Ivanovna, this is Sokolov. Nelyabov has been arrested. He confessed to arranging the accident and to keeping his wife under heavy medication. He saw on the security cameras how you found the hidden stash, and that's when he decided to run. But there was something else, an accomplice, a little helper who made it possible for Nelyabov to get his hands on Tatyana's inheritance." "And who was that?" Vera whispered. "Your husband, Andrei Vasilievich Lagunov." The world tilted. The painting, the room, Tatyana's face in the bed, all blurred together in one surreal stroke. Andrei wasn't just unfaithful, he was a partner in crime. Vera sank into a chair. Suddenly, everything made sense. The sudden financial troubles he tried to blame on her, the rush for divorce. "And one more thing, Diana. She's the sister of your employer," the major added. When the call ended, Vera sat in silence for a long time. Then she rose, walked to the easel, picked up her brushes and palette. She had to finish the painting, to rebuild the house on the canvas that looked as ruined as her own life. Stroke by stroke, she painted the missing half of the mansion, filling it with sunlight, the very light missing from her reality. She poured all her pain and disappointment into the work, but also her new strength. Artyom walked quietly into the room. He stood behind her, watching as the canvas slowly came alive, whole again. Vera nodded slightly, without turning. Artyom went to Tatyana's bedside. She wasn't asleep. Her gaze was clearer now. Gently, he took her hand, checked her reflexes, touched her neck with professional precision, not as a gardener, but as a former doctor evaluating a difficult case. "I see how she reacted when the drugs were stopped. The damage is serious, but her brain is fighting. I think she can be helped. It will take a complicated surgery, but there's a chance." His voice carried so much confidence and passion that for the first time in a long while, Vera felt a fragile spark of hope. The divorce trial turned into a farce. Andrei sat pale and crushed, no longer the plaintiff, but a criminal accomplice. Diana, stripped of her arrogant pride, could barely lift her eyes. Vera didn't need to prove anything. The evidence spoke louder than words. The court not only dissolved their marriage, it declared Andrei guilty of fraud and conspiracy, leaving him without a single coin from their shared property. As Vera walked out of the courtroom, she didn't feel triumph, only bitter emptiness and relief. One chapter of her life had finally closed. The next months passed quickly, filled not with grief, but with busy hope. With the help of the best lawyers, hired by Tatyana, who was slowly recovering, Artyom managed to get his case reopened. He was fully cleared and got his medical license back. He was no longer just a quiet gardener in work clothes, but once again a confident, brilliant neurosurgeon. Artem personally assisted in Tatiana's surgery, which was led by his former teacher. The operation lasted 9 hours and, thankfully, was a success. There was a long road of recovery ahead, but Tatiana, strong and stubborn, clung to this chance. First came the wheelchair, then the walker, and one day Vera saw her walking slowly but steadily across the garden, leaning on a stylish cane. The painting Vera had finished now hung in the living room. The sunlit house on the canvas had become a symbol of their shared victory. Vera and Artem began spending more and more time together. They walked with Dima in the park, had dinners as a family, and talked about everything: art, medicine, the past that had wounded them, and the future that now seemed brighter than ever. One evening, while sitting in the very garden Artem had once transformed with his own hands, he gently took Vera's hand. "Vera, we both know what betrayal feels like, and how hard it is to trust again. But when I look at you, at Dima, I know my life finally has meaning. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want my home to become your home, forever. Will you marry me?" The tears that filled her eyes were tears of happiness. "Yes," Vera whispered. At their wedding, only the closest people were present. Dima, happier than ever, carried the rings. By the window, watching with a gentle smile, stood Tatiana. Her gaze was full of gratitude. Vera looked at her new husband, a man with kind eyes and golden hands, a neurosurgeon who had healed not only another woman's life, but also her broken heart.